Well, welcome back, people, to the Open-Minded podcast, and really excited to have Joe Daymond with me, or Joey D as he's known, raised in Wainuiomata, people. Wainuiomata, the 25-year-old Fijian Māori comedian is barely 4 years into his career, but he has sold out the Sky City Theatre, been on TV, and is about to have his own web series shown in the UK. He has had slots on shows like Have You Been Paying Attention in 7 days. He's got his own podcast and acquired a huge fan base online. He's also been a recent star on Celebrity Treasure Island, which I want to talk to him about. He's had some major turning points in his life, and he's talked about previously having imposter syndrome, which I identify with straight away, and also self-esteem issues from a young age. So him and I have got a lot in common. We're going to cover a lot of that stuff during this interview. Joey D, can I call you Joey D, mate? Is that all good?
As long as I can call you JK. As long as I can call you JK.
No, we're done. We're all over that. Mate, tell me about some of these turning points. We'll jump straight into it, because I think that when I looked and did some research on your stuff, you often talk about these turning points. So when you get to one, what are they? Are they painful? And then how do you assess them, and what do you do about them?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, JK, I appreciate you having me here, brother. I've looked up to you for a very long time. Not long enough that I ever saw you play rugby.
Yeah, but I was a bit worried once you told me that you're related to KT, Carl Tanana.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So I've heard some rubbish, mate, and I'll just say I love your work. I love your work.
Does he take credit for your sense of humour? Does he say, "Oh, you get that off Uncle Carl"? Or
you know what's funny is, like, I do credit my uncle and aunt, so my Uncle Carl and my auntie Karen, his wife. I credit them a lot for a lot of my humour, because, like, as you know, JK, like, they're the biggest piss takers. Apologies for the swears, but they're like, there's never a serious moment with them, and I've spent so much time with them growing up, like lived with them for a couple of years in some really, really tough times in my life, and man, they made it easy. And so yeah, I genuinely do credit them for a lot. Not as much as my uncle will probably say. Like, he'll probably take even more, even though I'm doing it. But yeah, man, like, I've had heaps of. I've been lucky to, and I consider turning points like, a bigger blessing than kind of anything you can ever think of, because obviously it's just you really coming to a lot of realizations in your life. And so my biggest one, I would say, was middle of 2017. I had just come back from doing a bit of traveling, and I was about 21 at the time. And it's one of the biggest realizations that I think, like, a lot of, like, not only just Māori and Pacifica men in general, but, like, I think a lot of, like, small town people will really relate to, is that you kind of look around to your environment, and you look at the people around you, and you look at where you are and how you see yourself, and then you think about where you want to be. And it's like a really, really big, and super tough moment where you kind of admit to yourself, like, these things aren't lining up. And it was a case for me where I was looking at my mates, and these are guys who have been mates like literally my entire life, since we're kids, since we're babies. And I was looking at the people I was spending time around and the things I was doing. I was drinking a lot and wasn't really too focused on doing really anything, like, constructive with my life, but I knew what I wanted to do. And so that was a massive turning point where the biggest catalyst of it was cutting off my mates, because it was a big realization that I'm being influenced by a lot of the people around me to live a life that I know I don't want to live. And so the first thing is going to have to be breaking away from that. And then I'm going to be able to start from zero once I do have that little weight off my back, and really figure out, like, what it is I want to do with my life. And it was like one of the hardest moments of my life, because how do you sit around, seemingly with kind of, no mates and kind of no family, and you're just really sitting there like, well, what now? And so I would say that was the first and biggest turning point of my life, was that moment there.
I think it's really interesting, because through my depression, I went and saw my mum, and she said, I said to her, I feel dead inside. And she said, well, the good thing about your dead is you're still here and you can start again. But it was amazing for me that I didn't think I could. I thought I had to bring my past with me. Now, I didn't have any issues with my past, but from that day on, I started again.
Yeah.
So what sort of, if someone's listening to this podcast and they go, well, what was your first step then? So once you've come to the realization, and I always say to people, actually realizing something is the first point of call. Once you've realized it,
sure,
then your first step is, what was your first step? What would you advise people to do?
That's a real good question, bro. Like, how it went in my head was, I had that realization that my life is not where I want it to be, and I'm not living a life that's mine, really. And so the first thing I did was I genuinely made a list, and I wrote all the things that are making me feel bad about myself, in this time. And I didn't just keep it to, my own insecurities, because I know my own insecurities. I think about them every single day. And, I know them deeply. But what I thought about was, okay, what are the things externally of me that are actually making the problem worse? And I remember just thinking about how, sometimes I'd be around my mates, and this is, classic Kiwi led behavior. I had become so used to just feeling leaving our interactions together, as a group, and just feeling the biggest idiot and feeling like the biggest loser, just because what our humor and what our attitudes are towards each other is, it's a complete disregard for, what you may be feeling or going through. And humor in Kiwi culture in particular is just, finding your mates' insecurities and using that as their nickname. It's all that kind of stuff. And so I just realized that a big pinnacle moment for me was, I remember I told the boys what one of my biggest dreams was, and it was about something random. I don't even think it's anything I'm particularly into, but I remember it was something to do with property development, and I was like, boys, I want to be a property developer. And I remember they just roasted me, and that feeling came through, but it was a really clear indicator that went off in my head, where I was like, okay, this is where the feeling's coming from. Even when I'm trying to be vulnerable and talk about something that's fairly easy to talk about, which is your dreams, I can't even talk to these guys about it. So of course, when I'm struggling, it's gonna be near impossible to talk to them about it if I can't even talk about when I'm feeling good. And so that was a big realization for me, and that was one of the things I put down, is what's making me feel the way I'm feeling. And then once that list kind of stacked up, I then turned it into a to-do list and created actions that I needed to go through with each of those things in order to take control of my life back. And, when it came to figuring out that my mates weren't good for me and they were making me feel a certain way, my action became, okay, I have to basically cut them off. And I don't looking back in hindsight, it wasn't necessarily maybe the best solution, but it was just a solution that I found for that problem. And I just did that for all the problems that I could. And I didn't think about 5-10 years ahead. I just thought, okay, what do I need to do right now just to get all this stuff off my shoulders so that I can start from zero, and then I'll slowly just build everything back, but I'll be able to do it without any of this pressure on me to do it a certain way.
Why do you think, and this is a really, really important discussion, because I often talk about reaching out and talking to people, but sometimes you get shit back.
Yeah.
So why do you think your friends were like that? You think they had the realization, or not the realization, or the internal fear to try and be something a bit bigger or different?
What I realized, and I had no idea about this back then, but I've learned it as I've gotten older, is they were just going through the exact same things as me. And a lot of those attacks on your own insecurity come from their own insecurities. And I know it's such a cliche thing to say, but something that I've been talking about a lot lately is that when it comes to men, and I'll speak mainly for I guess young men that I know, so that's young brown men, is that in New Zealand we suffer from an inability to express ourselves. And so if I think back to a lot of the men that I grew up around, we don't have an awful lot of outlets when it comes to our expression. A lot of us, it is just rugby. I was lucky that I was into a bunch of different things. But because the things that I was into, which was like, I loved movies, so I loved directing and acting, and I loved like reading about all that kind of stuff. But that wasn't stuff that was really encouraged amongst us to explore, and it wasn't something that was considered cool amongst us. So it was never something that I could ever express openly. It was very much like like a when everyone's gone and on my own thing. And so us as Kiwi men, we kind of put this pressure on each other that expression to us has to look a very specific way. And it goes back, like I tie sort of tall poppy into this, but I don't see it as kind of tall poppy where anytime somebody speaks about something that they're happy about themselves with, or anytime somebody speaks about something that's a little bit out of the ordinary in everyone's heads, that's something that's to be shot down. And so because that's so normal amongst us, none of us ever learn how to like put ourselves out there in a vulnerable way, even when we're happy, like in a happy, vulnerable way, like a, hey boys, I feel like we should go like try painting, or, so of course, when you flip that to a vulnerability that is based off of something that you're finding tough, then of course you have absolutely no way of communicating that if you couldn't even do it when things were good. And so that's what I've kind of drawn a conclusion to, is I think a lot of my, I thought to a lot of those boys that really gave me, really like made my life a little bit difficult back then. And I thought about like what outlets do they have to express themselves at any point then? And it was, it was nothing. It was drinking.
Mm.
So many of us get tied to drinking because it's the first time we can be ourselves uninhibited, because at the end of the day, we can just go back and say, oh yeah, we were drunk. That's why I did that. So we have that built-in excuse. So we all for the first time feel free. And that's why so many of us become tied to it. And so I just knew my mates were really suffering from that. And I look back at it in hindsight and I'm like, man, they felt just as trapped as I did. And the reason they wanted to shoot me down for it was because they didn't want anyone to think that they were going through it too. So I may be wrong, but yeah, that was.
No, it's really interesting you talk about this, and I want to get back to this expression piece. So I did a program on television once called School of Hard Knocks, right?
Yeah.
So here's middle class white. I'm middle class white, brought up in South Auckland, brought up around Pacifica and Māori. Never, but I guess I still have a middle class white lens to it, regardless, right? My niece calls it generational racism, and so, or generational prejudice, where you look at something and you don't see it as any different. But it was really interesting because I walked in and these guys had their heads down. I mean, the education system had absolutely spat them out. Some of them were, they had ankle bracelets, but they could write, compose, and sing a song in harmony in 20 minutes about the moment, but they did not think it was intelligence. Yeah. How does that work?
Exactly. Exactly. And it's because the value of what they're doing there is so low in comparison to what they're expected to be doing. And so, a lot of those guys, they have a view that's been pushed onto them where they can only contribute to society in one way. And so if you're doing anything other than that, then, it's either not useful or you're wasting your time. Like I look at myself in high school, but like I said, I was obsessed with movies. I wanted to be I've been wanting to be a movie director and wanted to like direct productions and stuff and all that kind of mess. And, a lot of people would just push me into the rugby player. I got pressured into just wanting to be a rugby player, purely just because when you look at me, that's kind of the expectation of what you think is the value that I bring. And anytime that I reach outside of that, then everybody's going to be like, no, that's not really you. And it's something that I still face to this day, man. Like the early days of my comedy career, a lot of people saw me come into the scene and, I had a lot of like very ambitious goals on where I wanted to be. But to them, I was just, I'm just like a young sort of brown dude. No doubt you're just here to tell jokes and then just leave again and just not take any of this seriously. But yeah.
It's really interesting. So I love comedy. So part of my mental health is I love to have a laugh. And I think comedy is a huge part of keeping people well. I often say to people, if I'm feeling a bit flat, I'll go and look at some comedy and that sort of stuff. But when I did quite a bit of research on comedians, a lot of them seem that they struggle a lot, and the expression is through their comedy. So, if you think about what you've just explained, and I think about the courage that it must have taken, but shit, mate, comedy, like you could have gone to like something a little bit easier, my man. Like, so did you just go, oh, here I am, I'm going to break out, I'm going to make these incredible, courageous decisions and stuff it. I'm going to go into one of the hardest industries in the world. I mean, did you just decide to go, wow, well, why not? But you talked about wanting to be a producer and actor. So where did the comedy bit come in?
So where comedy came in was I just took to like what felt natural to me. And I think this is something that like so many of us, shy away from, is like we look at what comes natural to us and we look at like what we naturally are drawn to, but we immediately dismiss that as valuable. And it's kind of like that you look down on yourself so much and you think so low of yourself that you think anything you could possibly be good at could not be valuable to anybody. And I had that, like I'd always been pretty like a pretty natural public speaker, and like I'd always been pretty like, growing up around my uncle and aunt, they're like one of the many in my family that are just like just crack up ass and just absolute piss takers. And it's an environment that like so many of us grow up in, like you yourself included, JK, you would have grown up around heaps of dudes like that. And so yeah,
we couldn't get away with some of the stuff that we used to say to each other. Yeah. In the changing room, like it was just like brutal sometimes.
Oh, right. I know. And so that was just my thing, bro. Like I just looked at it and I was kind of, okay, here's something that I have no idea if I'm any good at it. I've never done it before, but I feel like I have the natural skills for it. So I may as well just give it a go, and we'll just kind of see what happens. And that's as simple as it happened. Like I just looked at all the things, like, because I looked at myself and I was like, okay, I haven't finished uni. The best job I can get is like cleaning graffiti off walls. And I'm not even kidding. Like I was, applying for jobs and stuff and couldn't get anything. So I just sat back and I was like, okay, what do I feel like I'm naturally either good at, or I feel like I could learn quite quickly? And comedy was one of them. And then I just dived into it because I was pretty much at the point in my life where I was like, well, it's kind of going nowhere anyway. So I may as well just take a punt on this thing that I may be able to do. And it sounds silly how simple it was, but that was literally it.
So when you started again and you wrote down that list, comedian wasn't on it, but what was in that sphere? What did you write down for yourself that made you head in that direction?
I had random ones. I had interior design, because my auntie Helen, she was a massive interior design enthusiast, and so while I was living with them, I used to always read interior design books and that. So I had like a massive interest in it. I was hopeless at it. If you saw my room, you'd be like, "What are they smoking in here?" But yeah, so interior design was one of them. So I applied for the Interior Design Institute, and it was just because I had an interest in it. Rugby coaching was another. So I started coaching a rugby team, varsity 85s. Nice. Legends. Shout out to the boys. And I had a bunch of different ones. I had a flight attendant, but I think I wanted to be with flight attendants, not be one. But
yeah. So tell me, like, this is just before we go forward.
Yeah.
There's high suicide rates in Māori and Pacifica.
Yeah.
I think, for me, people like yourself can make a huge difference. And what you just explained to me was really insightful about some of the things that our young people need to do if they feel trapped, right? So why do you think, how did you deal with your low self-esteem? Because having the courage to actually make that break means that at some stage you said, I'm not happy with my self-esteem, I've got to do something about it.
Yeah. It was it was really like a point in my life where I was just like, I consider my value so low, and I consider myself genuinely like not good at anything. Like if you had asked me, I wouldn't have been saying it in like a way to, to like, try and like get sympathy. Not that that's at all what people try and do, but I genuinely like couldn't tell you like what I was any good at and what I was, valuable for. And so that was really the catalyst for me to be like, well, I'm going to go find it. And I don't know if that's something that was like, innately in me as a person, or I just had a moment where I was like, I genuinely don't feel like I'm giving anybody any value in my life. So I'm going to go look for it, and I'm going to go find like what that is. And that was really the push. That was really the push for me, man. And it was a determination to really prove to myself that like, nah, there must be something, there has to be something. And that was, where it really started from.
The other thing that really intrigues me is, how do we distinguish between the great humor, which you've been brought up with, and the dangerous humor, right? The digging at your self-esteem, pulling someone down. Because I think I absolutely love being around KT, being around Pacifica, being around Māori, because their humor is very, very special. I mean, you don't need to go to a comedy show sometimes, you just need to sit around with these people. But the stuff that I deal with is normally on the positive side of humor. I mean, how do we distinguish? Because I know that a lot of Māori and Pacifica do use humor in moments of crisis as well. Yep. So how do you distinguish as the receiving end of it?
Like JK, it's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing because, drawing back to that expression thing, for a lot of like Māori and Pacifica, our humor is the only form of like any genuine expression that we ever get. So the reason like Islanders and Māori are so ruthless when they're making fun of each other is because that's their real feelings coming out for the first time. Because when you think about both of those cultures, we come from a place of like, and there's an intense like hierarchical respect for not only like our elders but for authority, and that's something that's pushed onto us by our not only our parents but grandparents and stuff. And so we're constantly discouraged to ever like speak out about like how we truly feel in any kind of environment. And so that's why the humor is the thing that comes out and it comes out so blunt and so like ruthless, and it hurts so deeply when they do come after you, because that's the first time they've ever been spoken to about it. Because you get a group of Islanders together and you let them have a laugh and joke about and joke around, and they'll tell you all the secrets in the world, all their insecurities, and that'll be everybody like being open and just cracking jokes and stuff. And you'll really get to hear like people's thoughts and stuff. But you get a group of Islanders in a serious circle, a group of Māori in a serious circle, young in particular, and you ask them like what their genuine thoughts are, their genuine struggles, bro, you'll struggle to hear a peep. They won't say anything. And so when it comes to like distinguishing the difference between what's hurtful and what's safe, is genuinely, I would say if you have an experience with a Pacifica or Māori or just a brown person in general whose humor is genuinely like cutting through, take that as a really, really clear sign that that they may have something that needs to be spoken about on another level. Like I know for me, like I try not to do it as much anymore, but I used to, in that my real thoughts and feelings, I'd put them out as jokes so that we could all laugh about it. But then if anybody ever stopped me and said like, do you actually think that, it would really bring me back to like what I truly think and feel about it, and I'd be able to talk about it openly. So,
but don't we just, Joey, don't we just need to educate? Because often when I look at Māori and Pacifica, why should you change the way we are? Why can't we just educate around listening properly, right? Why would you have to come to the Palangi way or something,
Yeah.
Why can't we just say, like, what the insight you just gave me was amazing, and why should anyone change to other ways if that's the way. Maybe we just need to teach our elders or our leaders, or people who are leading like you, just to understand and listen and take the moment. I don't know.
100%. No, I fully agree. I honestly fully agree, and that's why, like, what I was talking about before with the, if you feel like slighted or you feel hurt by like what's being said, then there's a bigger conversation and that has to be had on where it's coming from, as opposed to like, what and like what's being said. Because I think that's like where a lot of like dialogue gets lost, and it gets lost in how things are said instead of like what's being spoken about. If you like listen to a lot of Islander humor and a lot of like Māori humor, a lot of it comes from very like deep places of pain, and it's going to offend like a lot of people. Like my humor offends a lot of people, but like what I always say is like, think about like what I'm speaking from. Don't think about what I'm saying. And then like we can have a real conversation where we can both learn about what's being spoken about, and so that's like the biggest thing I would say from it. Yeah.
Some amazing things. Make a list, which will help you take control. Just start.
Yeah.
Try anything. You're talking about being I wouldn't want you serving me bloody coffee on a flight, to be fair.
What about cookies?
Yeah, I'll take the cookies. Try anything. So you've done these amazing transformation and courageous things. I mean, but tell me, when did you start trusting your creativity? When did you start saying, shit, I'm worth something here?
It's a really good question. I think probably it would have taken about 2 or 3 years into my comedy career. So I've been doing comedy for about close to 5 years, but about 4-ish years. And it probably took me about half that time at least to really build up the trust in myself. And I think like, I don't know, I wish I had like a way more like, dramatic and like instantly applicable answer, but it was really just the act of doing and the getting into a routine of doing it that got me to that point. But what I will say is, you've got to get yourself to a place where you're working on something that you actually enjoy, because the routine and the process of it for me was so fun and so easy that I didn't even feel like that's what I was doing. And, so many of us, we think of like routines, and we think of like, we hear things that we need to do to make our life better or to help us get to certain places. And we're like, no, I don't want to do that. There's something out there that's going to make you want to do it. So find that thing. And I was just lucky that I found that thing. Yeah.
That was inspirational, mate, because doing is what you need to do.
Yeah.
Right. So you're doing it, right? And you're doing it. And I'm really interested in this because, people say to me, oh, you scored the try against Italy. I hated it because I was waiting for the coach to drop me. I was never good enough, thinking, oh, should have changed the ball from this hand to that hand. I mean, and I say to people, did you think I was good enough? And they go, yeah. And I said, it didn't matter because I didn't, right? So, when did you start conquering the imposter syndrome? And explain that to me, what it felt like in you.
Damn. I think what the imposter syndrome felt like is, it genuinely felt like and JK, like I would love to hear like how yours felt on this, because mine felt like I'm sitting in a room looking around at all these people and I'm like, damn, I'm nowhere near any of these people and where I need to be. And it was just a constant feeling of like, I don't deserve to be here. Like, I've got to do my thing is like, I really suffer heavily from comparison. And I think the only way I've made it like, any sort of beneficial in my life is I've always compared myself to people that are way better than me. And so in one sense, it's always kind of, swayed my confidence and hurt me, because I'm comparing myself unrealistically to people that are just light years ahead of me. But I guess the one benefit that's come from it is that it pushes me so hard to chase them. And I know it's not something that's conducive long-term to like me being me being able to feel satisfaction within myself. But that's just, I guess, a coping mechanism that I've used with something that I've struggled with, which is the comparison. But that's literally what my imposter syndrome felt like, was like a genuinely looking at each and every person and comparing myself one-on-one with each of them and being like, no, I'm nowhere near any of them. Like, how was yours? Like, what did yours feel like?
Yeah, mine was about luck. So I call them my sharks, right? And the interesting thing about sharks, which is what you've just explained, is my sharks. So, for example, you talked about your sharks of comparison, right?
Yeah.
And the great thing about a comparison shark, it makes you swim bloody fast.
Yeah.
Right? But then when it starts eating you, it's not so good, because it's always going to catch you. And then, one thing I'd talk to you about comparison, I'd say, have inspiration from other people, but don't compare. But what it felt like in me was, I was lucky. When's someone going to find out that I'm not that good?
Yeah.
Right? And that came from a lack of education, always feeling dumb at school. So I had a dumb shark. I had an imposter shark, right?
Yeah.
And those sharks were driving me at times.
Yeah.
Right. I'll show you. You called me dumb when I was 15. I'll show you now I'm an All Black.
Yeah.
Then I got no joy out of that.
Yeah.
Or I'm doing all these amazing things on the field. When am I actually going to get found out that I'm just lucky? Now, they were coming from a whole lot of self-esteem and a whole lot of other issues. And I guess my biggest shark is I didn't love me for who I was.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's starting again. So that's how I felt. I never felt inferior, because I was doing some amazing things on the rugby field, which is a real contrast, right?
Yeah.
This is the problem that goes on with your head. You're sort of saying, why are you feeling like that, you idiot? Like, you're really confident. Like I used to say to Foxy, just give me the bloody ball, mate. And then on the other hand, I'd score an amazing try, and then I've got this other side of my brain saying, oh, you're just lucky you're going to be dropped Monday, So it was a complex, and that's why I call them my sharks, right? Because they were chasing me, making me swim. But it was also that emptiness of not actually loving me. I think it was also and emptiness is the best way to sort of talk about it. So tell me, you often talk about your battle, with drinking, but also overcoming depression. So we've got something in common there. What do you think was the key point where you started to fall back in love with yourself? Because people say, what's depression? I say it's complete fear, complete isolation, complete loneliness, and you could be a room of 300 or 400.
Yeah.
And you actually don't like you.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Like, it's, on that comparison thing, and the shark, making you feel kind of, you had like a lot of things in my head, a lot of things on the head for me. Like, man, I was at, like, sorry, this is like a little bit off your question, but I was at my Sky City show like a year ago, 750 people there. And honestly, bro, like, and I was lucky that I had so many of my good mates backstage, and I was just talking to them like, man, I've never felt worse in my life. Like, it's crazy, man. And like, it's almost something now that, like, I'm genuinely, like, I'm not even shitting you, JK. Like, I get embarrassed to talk about it. Like, not even just how I was feeling in the moment, but I get embarrassed to talk about that whole thing in general. And because, like, it was so weird. Like, I'd never, like, been faced with something where I was looking at it and it was like everything that I'd ever wanted. And then all I could think about myself was like, man, I'm not good enough to be here. And I'm not good enough for all these people to warrant, like, wanting to come, be a part of this. And I, like, feel bad inside myself that I've allowed these people to come and waste their time on that. And it's, to be honest, it's been like a massive.
But you nailed it, right?
Bro, like, honestly, I didn't. Like, I really, like, I had a, like, I played 2 really, really average shows. Like, I nailed the perception that it went perfectly. But I guess in myself, I just look at it and I'm like, man, I just did not do. Why I'm bringing this up is because you you kind of like rang a bell in my head about the shark thing, because I think, yeah, that comparison shark like finally ate me up in that moment, and that was all I could think of. And I don't know if I was comparing myself specifically to anybody in particular, but I think I was comparing myself to a version of myself that I wanted to be in that moment, and I wasn't it, and I wasn't that. And so because of that, and because I knew that within myself, I was like, no, I failed. And that was before I'd even gone on stage. And I went on stage because I was thinking about it. I was average. I came off. I was like, man, that was so embarrassing. And yeah, it's just been something that's like I've found really difficult to sort of put any words into my head about how I felt. But that kind of like actually,
I think the way I started to deal with it myself was, I can be average and good enough.
Yeah.
And that's okay, as long as I keep striving to keep getting better. Because what happens, what you explained to me was I'd come off the field and score 3 tries and have this hole in my gut, right? Thinking, shit, that was average. I should have scored 4, right?
Yeah.
I always remember a psychiatrist saying to me once, what do you actually want to be? I mean, do you want to be Superman or something? And I went, no. She said, well, you are out of touch with reality about what success is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was really interesting, because, sometimes you've got to listen to others, right? And so I had to get someone who I trusted and say to them, how did I play? And they said, oh, you did this well and did that well. They'd never say, so they told me what I did well and what I didn't do well. And I'd go, okay, I'll put those into 2 boxes. And it made it realistic, because our insecure, imposter syndrome, low self-esteem brains are never going to do that for us, because we're never good enough, right?
Yeah.
And so I started taking it like you did. I started making a list of what success looks like, because I think that expectation shark that you have, the reality is you can nail it and keep wanting to get better. I think that's where I've made peace. Okay, I come off at the end, right? And I go, this is when I'm through my problems, and go, okay, well, what was that from a reality point of view? What was good and what was bad? And then I say, okay, cool. Was it successful enough for people to pay money for me and think I was good? Excellent. That's enough. I've ticked that box. Can I get better? Yes. Rather than saying, well, that's how I started to deal with it, but it was starting again. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's where I'm at, is like I'm at like a point. I feel like I'm back to where I was in 2017, where I'm kind of like starting again, to be honest. And it's because the battle is it's a different battle now. Because back then it was really just all about like being able to get money, because I was like completely broke. Being able to, have a career that I guess I could talk to my parents about, because like we had a lot of conversations where they were literally just like, what are you even doing with your life? Like, people ask us, what are you up to? And we don't even really know what to say. And so it was, like I look back and it's like, it's very simple problems back then, but now it's like.
Yeah, but look, mate, I often say to people, hey man, I'm 56 and still don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. Often we think there's an end. And I think this is another thing that was really important through my depression. I really don't give a shit about yesterday, mate, because I can't change it. And tomorrow I don't know what's going to happen. So my goal is to be great today. And if you just concentrate on that. So I think, standing in front of 750 people at Sky City for 2 gigs is an incredible moment in your experience, buddy. Backpack.
Thanks, bro.
You're never going to get that back. How good is that? Yeah. Now, the perception is, if you've got the courage to go out and say, was I good or bad, and get a reality look at that, then that's just, man, I got that in my backpack. Next time it's going to be 1,500 or a TV show. And that's really interesting, because tell me about going viral, because and what that moment was like, because walking out in front of 60,000 people or 750 people is a way different feeling than going viral, right?
Yeah. Being viral is such a weird one, man. Like being viral. Got my jabs, don't worry. So boys, if I cough, I'm sweet. No, go viral is a crazy one because it's like, it really is, like people often talk about it. It's like a drug. Like you experience it, and you're seeing, you're seeing kind of all the feedback that you're getting, and it's all coming like at once, and it's a little bit overwhelming, and you go through like 50 million. I was watching this documentary called The Social Dilemma, and it talked about how, like, great documentary on Netflix, anybody watching. And one of the things that it talked about is that us humans, like, we're literally not programmed to be able to handle that kind of, like, we're like, our brains aren't even capable of being able to process like that kind of stimulation. And that's why, like when you do go viral and when things do react well, like it's such like a high. But the problem is that your expectation, like, and much like, okay, I'm gonna be honest, like, I haven't really done drugs in my life, so this is purely just coming from what my understanding of what it is. But it's kind of like you get yourself to a point there, but then that's like the point that it has to reach every time for you to feel satisfied. And so that high that you got felt so good, but you need to get there in order to feel, now you need to get there in order to feel like satisfied. And then it gets to the point where you have to get there in order to feel like the bare minimum. And so it's just like at the beginning, I had like a really toxic relationship with it, and that I like fiend for it and like really chased a lot of validation through it. But I'm lucky that now, I'm lucky that I experienced it a little bit older than I guess most people do when they start experiencing it, because I've got to the point of it where I'm like now, where I just kind of, I really don't judge myself too much based off of like what I experience when it comes to on social media. And so now if people look at my social media, it's a bit of a mess. I just post whatever, and but it's because I've got to a place now where I'm kind of happy with my relationship with it, and I just sort of do whatever on there.
And so how did you take control? Because I know a lot of our youth have, I mean, everyone has, I'm not saying just in our youth, but
yeah,
I'm reading some books at the moment, just about how much time and mental energy it does take up looking at your phone, and it does take away from creativity. I mean, you're in the creative game, so looking at your phone all the time or looking at social media is not going to help you come up
for sure
with those inspirations that you need. So how do you take control?
I found something bigger. I found something bigger that I wanted, and I think that's pretty much been the answer for every single sort of moment in my life where I felt like I've started to progress and then I've stopped. Is that, yeah, I just found something bigger and beyond myself to chase. And so I guess for me, like, there were just more things that I was looking for in my life outside of social media. And that's not even just in a personal sense. Like when it came to my career, there were bigger things. And when it came to like my life in general, there just became bigger things. Like, I've got 2 younger brothers and a sister, and I've got a lot of family that I, care really deeply about. And so it was just like really putting it into perspective. That seems to work for me every single time. And I know it sounds really cliche, but like that's honestly been the answer for me every single time. Yeah.
This just popped into my head. Have you reconnected with your mates?
Yeah. So we actually have, and it was amazing, man. Like one of my, he always has been one of my best mates. He's just had his second kid, and the other, another one's just bought his first house. And so we're all at such different stages of our lives now. And it's been, pretty much 4 or 5 years since we were all together. And last time I was in Wellington back home, we all actually got together at my parents' house, and they all got to meet my partner. I brought her around, and it was nice, man. And it was exactly that thing that I was just talking about. Like there's now bigger things in our lives, and there's more important things that we all kind of have found within our lives now. And so it was it was such a like nice full circle moment, and it just it hits home as to why I need to like keep putting things into perspective and remembering like what's really important. Yeah.
I also think we get taught this. I think listening to you, it's like listening to myself often. It's also important to say congratulations to me. We talk about it a lot at Mentor Mayor. You've done amazing, right? But often, with some of the traits that you and I both share together, we don't actually stop and go, well, congratulations to me. So, there are times, although you've still got that shark that drives you, which is an important part of you, you also need to sit back sometimes and go, wow, what amazing courage and stuff I've shown, Can you do that, or is that hard?
I mean, I would say it's the thing I'm worst at, and it's why like putting things into perspective is such like a big thing for me, because I'm so bad at it. Like after my second night at Sky City, I felt so badly about how I went, and I was hating, I just did not live up to the expectations I had of myself. And so the gig finished at like 10:30, 11, and I was back at my office at midnight and working till like 5, 6 in the morning, because I had pretty much, it was just like a back to work thing. You're now behind, you've got to get back into it. And so it's something that I've always been really, really bad at, was stopping and smelling the roses. And and I'm still bad at it now. And to be honest, JK, like I think of all the things that I struggle with, I really have no idea like what my direction is when it comes to that, just because every time I get somewhere, I think about, well, I've gotten to this point. If I slow down now, then I may just lose everything that I've just worked for, or, okay, sure, this is cool, but all these other problems and all these other things that I am still trying to like fight for, that I'm nowhere near there. So I have to, keep pushing. So yeah, it's a struggle that I've had for a long time, and still very much suffer from.
But you can learn it, right?
Yeah.
And you should. And I think that's really, really important, because what I talk about is, someone said, what was it like winning the World Cup? I said, it's the flattest feeling in the world. Right? So you win the World Cup that night, have a few beers, really good, have a party. Next day, you feel like shit, you feel flat, you don't know what to do next. Right?
Yep. Isn't it crazy? It's literally like I don't know what I'm doing. Like I never had that feeling so much more than after I've done something that I should seemingly be happy about, where it's like a genuine, what am I even doing with my life?
Yeah, but I think those things are important. So the first thing that I got was that awareness. Okay, so I've achieved a really big goal and I've worked really hard, so I'm going to feel flat. But then if it's coming, I don't feel flat anymore. I say, congratulations to me. I'm going to take 3 days off and really treat myself to whatever. And then I've got to restart.
Yeah.
That's how I learned it, because when it first hit me, I thought that it shouldn't feel like this. And so I did what you did. I just drove again instead of taking it. I've still got to drive, but you've just got to take a little bit of time out and go, I know I'm going to feel like that, but actually what I'm going to do is, go back home or fly somewhere or do something. So tell me, Joey, what's next for you, mate? I know you've started a creation, a content creation agency, but tell me what's next.
Yeah, so that's kind of like takes up all my time, and the company's actually been around for ages. I've had it for 4 years, and it's only really started to gain any kind of momentum like within these last sort of 3 to 6 months. So it's all sort of stuff related in there, like, as you said at the start, which I really appreciate. Like we've got the show Bouncers, which I'll co-direct and co-write, and my company will co-produce alongside Culture Factory, which is another amazing like Pacifica-led and Māori-led production company. So we've got Bouncers, which will be on Comedy Central UK.
Wow, how did that come about?
So my good mate Hanel Harris, who's like a amazing writer director, she's like, people don't realize, but she's about to be like the next Taika, and she's just on like the cusp of like about to blow up big time. Pretty much it was just all her. She like single-handedly willed it to happening. Like I brought her the concept and all the ideas and stuff, and she just made it happen. So I can't thank Hanel enough for making that happen. But yeah, man, so that's out next year, which will be crazy. Westpark, my company, we're about to do like a TV network deal as well, which we're just finalizing now, and just a whole bunch of random stuff. But I guess for me personally, like, yeah, I guess for me personally, I'm just like really trying to, my girlfriend's really pushing me to go to therapy and just like really look at developing like myself personally, because she hears all the ambition from me and she sees all the things I try and push for. And her attitude is always like, you know, that's cool and all, but like, what are you doing for yourself? She's always hitting me with it. And to the point where like it definitely gets like tough, because, you know, it's something for me that I've found like a lot of personal gratification from. And I like have always looked at it as something like, okay, surely everybody likes this. And she's just like, no, like, I don't really care about that. Like, what are you doing for you? And so that journey with her has been really tough, but really amazing. So I think that'll probably really be the biggest thing. Just listening to what my missus said, that says that's really it.
Cool. Yeah, well done, mate. That's good advice to hear, mate. Like,
Yeah, just
connect up, because I think going to get someone in your mental development's unbelievable. And I've had some great people help me. And, you know, I talk about, you know, if your knee was bung, you know, would you go to the butcher to get it fixed, or would you go to the best surgeon in town if you could, you know?
Yeah.
And we go to the best surgeon in town, and our brain's no different. And some of the learnings I've got and continue to get, you know, about self-development, because I think some of those empty feelings that you feel, if you still feel them, it means that you do need to reconnect and understand them, and get on top of them, because I think it's really, really important.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give your teenage self?
100% just be himself. Like, one of the things I did in high school was I behind the backs of all my mates, and like I didn't tell anyone. I was at boarding school, and so I would hide it from everybody, but I was teaching myself how to code, like how to make websites, just like basic CSS and HTML, like nothing flash, but yeah, I was teaching myself how to code and stuff, and I was also running like a high school first 15 blog, because I love rugby and I loved it back then, but I was like completely mud at it. And so I ran like a first 15 like news blog, but I also ran that under a pseudonym because I was embarrassed about people finding out about that as well. And so I just did heaps of stuff, man, that was like true to me, but I really did it without telling anybody. So my thing would absolutely be just be open and honest about like who you are and what you enjoy, because you'll drive a lot of people away, but the right people for you will come to you. And that's what I find now, is that whenever I put myself out there that I'm into something, like people just come to you that want to share that journey with you. And so just do it. Just put yourself out there. It's going to feel scary and vulnerable, but you're going to find people in your life that will change it. And, you know, you can change it just by starting to do that.
Okay, cool. So at Mentor, it's awesome, mate. At Mentor, we have the 6 pillars of wellbeing. I call it my daily mental health plan. So I absolutely live by these things. And people say, why do you put your mental health first? And I say, I'm a better husband, better father, better friend, you know, better workmate, but I'm a better me.
Yeah.
And so I've built these into my life. So, you know, we've done heaps of research, work with experts. We know that if you do this in your day, you're going to improve your wellness and that sort of stuff. So I just want to ask you some questions. So what do you do to chill? What do you do to relax and calm your mind and be present?
So before lockdown, it was always going to the movies. So when I was growing up, before we moved overseas, we were living in Northcote, just literally across the road from Bridgeway Cinema, which is
awesome.
on the coast there.
Yeah.
So my old man and my old lady they'd just take me as a little kid to the movies, and I would love it. And so my girlfriend talks a lot about how like unlocking your inner child is a massive way to like feel self-fulfilled. And so that's just pretty much what I do. Is like, it's a thing that I loved as a kid. It's a thing that I love now. I would just go to the movie theater, didn't matter what movie, and just like sitting there, get popcorn, and it would just always like bring me back to zero. And so whenever I'm feeling down, I always tell people about this. Whenever I'm feeling down, I head to the movies, and it never brings me up to 100, but it always brings me back to zero. And I always leave, and I at least feel a sense of, okay, I can go from here. I know what I need to do to get back to feeling like me. So that was always the thing.
Nice. How do you connect? What do you do to connect with people?
Me and my mates, we always will usually catch up for a beer, like typically after work, and we used to do it about once a month. It's getting hard because now heaps of my mates are moving away and stuff. But
yeah,
one cool thing that we used to do is we would do a group trip. Me and my 10 best mates who I met at uni, we would do one trip away together like every October. And obviously it's been tough these last couple of years, but that was an awesome thing. So just getting into a routine with my mates is something that's really important for all of us because we're all so busy. And so having like a scheduled hangout meetup has been like really beneficial for me, and I've loved it. And that's kind of been the way.
What do you do to be creative, and what hobbies do you have, or what do you do, or are you learning something new?
Yeah. So I've actually just this is real embarrassing, but I've actually just started taking up singing lessons.
Oh, well done, man. Awesome.
Just to honestly try something new. Like I'm not planning on becoming a musician or anything. Like I promise you, there's absolutely no way in hell I would ever. But I just wanted to challenge myself and try something different. So just sort of started taking up singing lessons. It's super vulnerable and super embarrassing because I suck at singing, but challenging myself creatively like that, it was stand-up, and then it was writing. And then because I've managed to mature in those places, I wanted to find another thing to kind of dive into creatively that I suck at now. And, maybe one day I'll be okay at. So the new one.
I took up the guitar, mate. It sounds like I'm killing a cat, but I love it.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to, sing or play for someone, but it's not about that, right? So how do you move? How do you keep active?
Spotify soon. I already
Nah.
Sorry, brother.
How do you move? How do you keep active?
But playing basketball is always a really good one for me. Like I just like making exercise fun because like I used to love going to the gym and going on runs and stuff, but because like I'll finish days and just be like tired as, the only thing that will kind of get me out of that feeling is doing something fun. And so catching up with mates and going to go play basketball. I used to play twice a week. And then during summer, I play basketball and play touch. So just getting out and like running around with my mates is kind of how I keep active. And it's that's kind of been like my sort of health and fitness focus really, as opposed to like going to the gym. And it's been really nice.
How do you celebrate? How do you foster a positive sense of self or self-compassion, finding fun?
Man, that's if there's any goal that I have for like the next 5 years, it's to really figure out like what my way of celebrating is, because I couldn't even tell you. Like I don't celebrate big moments. If anything, I usually shut myself off when something cool's happening because I don't want to feel like I'm being I don't want to feel like I'm being celebrated, and so I usually like shut it off from people. So that's got to be my next thing that I figure out, because you've made me realize like how much it's needed in your life, and I talk about it myself and I don't even do it. So
you probably celebrate better with other people's successes, right?
Oh, bro, for sure. When other people have stuff, like I feel like I'm really good at getting around that. But yeah, just myself, I'm no good.
So what do you do to enjoy for self-care and things that you look forward to every day?
I think just having a bigger thing that I'm chasing. Like for me, when I was coming up and I had sort of no opportunities and didn't know anybody in the industry, I also had no money, no like prospects or anything. I just had a dying passion to like, keep doing what I was doing. But I remember desperately feeling like if I just had one opportunity to get into the industry, like I would like absolutely, kill it if I got the chance. And so my bigger purpose now is like being able to like create and grant those opportunities to people. And so I guess that's my thing now, is like I've just found like a bigger and better purpose beyond myself. And so chasing the ability to be able to do that is like what gets me excited every day. And so I guess that's my answer. It's just finding something that you're passionate about and that makes your days exciting. And I guess that's why I struggle to get caught up in like celebrating and stuff, because the process of doing the stuff is actually what I enjoy. I don't really like the outcome, but and getting there is the fun.
Yeah. So just as we bring this to a close, mate, just some quick fire stuff. Who do you admire for having great habits around behaviors and well-being?
Two guys. I really admire Art Green and I'll say Art Green and Matilda. So yeah, like people will probably know them as the Bachelor and Bachelorette, the TV couple. But man, that guy lives he lives a really, really full life. Has an amazing relationship with his wife, amazing relationship with his kids, and his whole thing is always about like taking care of his mind and body. And he's a super healthy dude. Like, eats really healthy, but if he wants to go eat a pie, like he will. If he wants to go do something, like they'll go do it. He just lives his life by like, what do I feel like doing right now and what's going to make us all happy? And he just goes and does it. He's somebody that I look at and I'm like, he's put no restrictions on his life, and he's really like experiencing it in the full way that it's supposed to be experienced. And so I'd say Art and Matilda are doing that amazingly.
Nice. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading Seth Rogen's autobiography, yearbook. So it's just a collection of like stories from growing up, and he started stand up when he was a teenager, and obviously becoming famous and stuff. So he talks heaps of stuff about that, and it's a real relatable book. And anybody that is listening, you gotta grab it.
What do you listen to podcasts? If so, what are you listening to?
Yeah, definitely. So I don't know, like I kind of work too much. So my podcasts, I feel like aren't like super. They're amazing. So I listen to this one podcast called Startup by Gimlet Media, which is, and he just sold. It's about this guy who actually just sold his company to Spotify for like 200 million.
Gosh.
And the podcast is about him starting up that podcast company, but like he records like interviews and contract negotiations and all of that. Like it's like a podcast documentary.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really, really good. And then the other one I listen to is Industry Standard by Barry Katz, which is it's just an entertainment podcast about the entertainment business. And he just interviews like heaps of really powerful like entertainment and media people. And that's a really interesting listen as well.
What keeps you awake at night?
What keeps me awake at night? Honestly, man, like, yeah, worrying about like, so I like daydream all day, and I think about things that I want to do and things I can't, things I can and can't do constantly. And so I would say that keeps me up like at night. Not only the anxiousness of wanting to get there, but the ideas that will get me there. And so I just always have my phone by me, and I have to like jot down notes and stuff, and if I want to get a good sleep at night. But that's usually what keeps me up.
What do you think's an open mind?
I think an open mind. A lot of people like say an open mind is somebody that like doesn't have any judgment or doesn't like have any. Yeah, but like what I've always thought of an open mind is somebody who actually they do have their own like ideas, and they do have the ability to be like judgmental, but they choose not to be, and they choose to see others for their perspective and where they're coming from. And I think a truly open-minded person can speak with somebody directly that they disagree with wholeheartedly and still be able to listen to their perspective and understand like where they might be coming from. That's what I reckon it is.
Who should I interview next?
Should you interview next? Art Green would be a really good one. Otherwise, dang, that's a really good question. I would love to see you interview. Actually, I think I wrote, sorry, Jake, I'm just going to have a look. I think I wrote down someone that I thought would be. Oh, actually, you should interview Bryce Casey from The Rock.
Bryce, yeah, I know Brycey.
Brycey is the man. He's the man. Like he's done so much work for mental health.
Yeah. Awesome.
And just making it like a super relatable and open-ended conversation. Bryce, I would be so excited to see you talk to Bryce, man. That would be so cool.
So any last thoughts for the listeners, mate? This has been amazing. Just want to thank you, your openness, your honesty. It's been amazing. I've loved it.
I appreciate it, JK. I think and even in moments like this, bro, like I feel like a little kid again, just because like it's quite surreal, the people that I get the chance to talk to. Like, I'll tell you a funny story. I used to watch this documentary that you were in about Matt Ridge. Has changed from rugby union to rugby league.
Yeah.
And you hosted it.
Yeah.
And I would watch it all the time, bro. And when I was playing rugby this is gonna sound so weird, man, but I was always a really good trainer. Like I was always really good at training and preparing and stuff. And for some reason, I would watch that documentary all the time, like before I would go to training and stuff. I have no idea why, but I remember I just found you super relatable. I always thought like Reggie was a bit out the gate, but I always thought you were super cool. And so it's a little bit of a full circle moment being able to talk to you, bro. And so I really appreciate you having me on the show. And it's so cool to finally meet you, man, because yeah, I've looked up to you for a long time, JK. And yeah, I just really love the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you, mate. And I appreciate you coming on. And, you know, I think my time's just about done. And young, amazing people like you, it's now your turn to pick up that mental health mantle and talk about it. And you've been doing that. So I appreciate what you've done. I'll just end with this little story about that documentary. So Ricardo Solizzo and I couldn't get any funding for it. So we put 25 grand on his credit card and made it.
Oh my God.
We sold it afterwards for 27 grand. So we made $1,000 each. And that's the industry that you live in, you know. Sometimes you just got to take the risk.
Right, it was a good doco, man. Good doco.
I think you're the only one that liked it, but I appreciate it anyway. Joey, you've been amazing. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep learning and growing. Keep being a great leader that you are. It's been a real pleasure, my friend.
I appreciate it, JK. Thanks, brother.